For next week, our text is from the 13th chapter of Mark. And if you read the 13th chapter of Mark from a study Bible, you'll get a different title for it, depending on who wrote the notes in your study Bible. Some of them say this is about the Markan apocalypse. Some of them say this is about the end and the coming of the Son. Regardless, it is about the prediction of the destruction of the temple and the events of the end. And I will admit that there was a moment this week when, for me, apocalyptic visions seemed to apply. But our job as individual children of God remains the same, no matter what. Our job is to act justly, to treat all persons with loving kindness, and to walk humbly with our God. We are blessed that our congregation is not politically all of one mind. We come from different backgrounds. We have different experiences and opinions, and some of us are rejoicing while some of us are weeping. And you can't hate your neighbor with your mind stayed on Jesus. On both the Democratic and Republican side of the presidential election, much of the political rhetoric that we heard was spoken against the other side, demonizing the other side, saying what would surely happen if the other candidate were elected. Much of that political talk was designed to stir up fear. And the reason for that is because fear has an impact on human beings. Fear, like my fear of camping out with the wild critters, can make me afraid to do things. Fear often wakes up what they call that reptile brain, our oldest part of our brain, the one that does flight or fight, freeze or fawn. It's not our best creative thinking brain. It's not our best problem-solving brain. It's our I gotta get out of here right now brain. For some of us, it's flight. Run away as fast as you can. Or sometimes it's fight, like a trapped animal. The adrenaline runs and we become stronger than we were. For some of us, it's like that deer in the headlights where we just freeze because we don't know what to do next. And I learned this week there's some folks who say there's a fourth reaction, fawn, a response to fear that makes us want to do whatever it takes to appease the one who scared us. And as we gather together in this place, all of us, I want to invite you, if you have any fear, to speak to that fear. If you don't, you can speak words of compassion as the children did to mine. Whatever it is that's scaring you right now. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese monk and peace activist, suggested that one of the best ways of feeling with those difficult emotions of anger and hurt and fear is first to recognize them. Is it okay if I step a little bit to the left, Marcia? I'm going to step over here. He talks about your hurt or your anger or your fear that gathers right in your belly, and it feels like it wants to run the show and make all the decisions from here on out. He says, speak to it kindly, with compassion. I see you. I hear you. I appreciate the information that you're giving me. I'm going to take care of you. And that in convincing our fear or our anger or our hurt that it is seen and heard, hopefully we can get out of that flight or fight or fear or fawn and get to a place where we can, in our creative minds, find compassion both for ourselves and for others. I hope that's a practice that you will be practicing over and over whenever you feel that fear or hurt or anger welling up. Speak kindly to it, as you might speak to a child that you're trying to calm. And so I speak kindly to it in this prayer. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts and meditations of all of our hearts, and the feelings in the pit of our stomachs be acceptable to you, O God, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. And now, dear God, either through me or in spite of me, speak the word that those who are listening need to hear today. Amen. In the story of the widow who is there in the temple, who has 2 coins that she puts into the temple treasury, there is an observation by Jesus that she put in all she had to live on. And many a stewardship sermon has been preached saying, we put in all we have to live on in following Christ. We put in our whole selves into this following of Jesus. We're called to not hold anything back. Jesus looks at the scribes, the scholars, the leaders of the religious order who wear long robes and maybe beautiful stoles, I don't know. And he says, you devour widows' houses. He's referring to the fact that the temple was such a place of ostentatious riches that more money went to that than to supporting the people in their midst who needed support. Now, I am again grateful to be here in this congregation. I think it's a beautiful sanctuary, but it doesn't feel ostentatious to me. In fact, the part that I love the best is the windows that we can look out and see the beauty of God's creation. Also that I can tell when people are no longer paying attention because there's such beauty for them to look at out the windows. I am grateful that we have the opportunity to be ones who are able to give more than 2 coins to rub together. I'm grateful that there is this story in which Jesus says this gap between the very rich and the very poor is not a good thing. In the next chapter, we talk about the coming of the end of Jesus' ministry, of him dying on a cross and rising again from the dead. I'm grateful that in the scriptures and in our own lives, any one day is not all there is. We stop where we are. We thank God for the things that we see around us that we give thanks for. And we ask God where there are things that we have the power to change, that we feel need to be changed, how we can work together to change them. In this moment, I'm hoping that we as a congregation can think about how God is calling us to act in the world beyond these walls. We are blessed in this time of our stewardship, partly because of the gift of Hillis Wilson, who left his estate to the church, partly because of the gifts of those who've gone before us, who paid off the building, who gave us resources that we can live into, that we can do more than we have ever done before. What is it that God is calling us to do as a congregation that will bring more compassion into this world, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, regardless of where you are on the economic spectrum? Our job is the same: to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with our God. Amen? I want to tell you a short story about that first hymn that we sang. The first hymn was called, This Is My Land? Is that? This Is My Song, thank you. And it was written kind of jointly. First, the tune was written before any words were put to it. The tune was written by someone who was Finnish, and the country had been taken over by Russia. And they were writing this tune. It was first written as a song of protest, a song of how beautiful is my country. And because that was seen as a way of being rebellious, it was then renamed things like thoughts upon a Finnish spring morning or something like that. But then, sometime later, a public school teacher who lived in Hawaii wrote some words to the tune, and they were songs for singing about my land is beautiful and the land of others is also beautiful. I see beauty everywhere. It was a song that took off partly in the Methodist Church in times of political action on behalf of the church, social action that the church was taking to right wrongs in society. And there were people who really wanted it to be included in our hymn book, but it only had those first two verses, and you'll note that they don't speak much about God. They speak about the beauty of creation. They speak about it being everywhere, but they don't speak about the God who created it all or who calls us to care for it all. And so one of the people on the United Methodist Hymn Book Committee called on a young woman named Georgia Harkness. Now, if you don't know Georgia Harkness, it's a name I want you to remember because she graduated from Cornell University for her undergrad. Yay! She went on to Boston University and was one of the first to get a PhD there, one of the first women to get a PhD there. There were many men who had done it before. She got two master's degrees, one in religious education and one in, I think, religious philosophy. But the United Methodist folks who were wanting to put this song into the hymn book commissioned her to write another verse to the hymn, one that would call us to who we are called to be in God. And she did. And that verse is the final one that we sing, that calls on us to be the people that God is calling us to be. This is my prayer, O Lord of all earth's kingdoms. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. Let Christ be lifted up till all shall serve him, and hearts united learn to live as one. O hear my prayer, O God of all the nations. Myself I give thee. Let thy will be done. In that prayer, she is not saying 10% I give to God. She is saying, myself I give thee. Thy will be done in my life. Amen. On its face, the widow's gift of 2 coins, all she had to live on, is not sensible. It's an extravagant gift to an organization that clearly already has enough money. But it's given from her heart, not from her wealth. It's given out of her gratitude for God's presence in her life. Jesus' gift of himself, of his whole life, is an extravagant gift given to us at no cost. What we return is our lives, ourselves, and how we choose to give them makes all the difference. Amen. Amen.